All right, welcome back to another edition of We Rise Fighting Labor podcast. We bring you today's labor news, history, and analysis from the U.S. and around the world. This is a podcast you listen to with your fellow workers organizing on the shop floor. This is a podcast you listen to before walking into your union meeting. As always, I'm Rico Rutia here with my co-host, Brian Pfeiffer. As always, we're going to kick off the news segment of this episode with a report on U.S. labor in solidarity with Palestine. Afterwards, we're going to look at Kroger workers in West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio who have authorized a strike. Then we're going to jump to janitors in the Twin Cities who are expected to begin a strike tomorrow, March 4th. And then we're going to go international. We're going to talk about Nigerian unions being on nationwide strike, as well as Argentinian unions being on general strike. Then we're going to bring it back to the U.S., talk about the Teamsters at Anheuser Busch and how they may have avoided a strike. And then we're going to close things off with Starbucks workers and a report on how they may have gotten closer to their first contract. All this and more in today's episode of We Rise Fighting. Brian is going to go ahead and introduce today's music.
As we mentioned last week on We Rise Fighting, March is Women's History Month, and March 8th is International Working Women's Day worldwide. In honor of this, we at We Rise Fighting begin this episode with a salute to the sisters with Ruthie Foster's Working Women.
Overtime and underpaid. She's kicking ass and taking names. She's punching that clock, she's climbing that ladder, she's spinning those wheels. She can do your job 10 times better and do it in heels. So get your glass up for the working woman. When you gotta get it done, call the working woman. Thank God for the working woman. This country's run by the working woman. Don't be fooled, she ain't no...
And listeners, in our ongoing solidarity with Palestine, we continue to start off We Rise Fighting episodes with Palestine and labor support for Palestine. International Day of Solidarity took place March 2nd. Millions worldwide took to the streets to stand in solidarity with Palestine and to demand an end to U.S.-Israel genocidal apartheid. All across the U.S., mass demonstrations took place and also in many other countries. And many labor delegations were a part of this in the United States and beyond, and also many individual union members helped to organize these demonstrations across the world. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel participated in a Palestine solidarity delegation in Cuba March 2nd. He said, quote, "Humanity is witnessing with horror a new Holocaust in the Gaza Strip, the largest open-air prison in the world, with no fewer than 2 million Palestinians living in a concentration camp," end quote. In Cuba, many took to the streets in solidarity with Palestine on March 2nd, as they did in Venezuela, all across the United States, and all around the world. On the same day, the Poor People's Campaign here in the United States held protests in many, many cities within the U.S. Most of these actions had Palestine solidarity contingents, such as the one in Madison, Wisconsin, with signs and banners demanding an end to U.S. aid for Israel and money for people's needs and not for the endless U.S. war machine. Many workers came into contact with the Poor People's Campaign during these demonstrations, and also the Palestine contingents, which was a positive development, of course, for the movement generally. And this included Hyundai workers who joined the Poor People's Campaign rally at the Alabama State House in Montgomery, and many other union members joined in Poor People's Campaign activities across the country. And as we've reported previously, the Hyundai workers now have majority support in Alabama and are moving forward with their organizing campaigns, and the UAW is organizing that. And within the UAW, there's a caucus to support Palestine, including which includes Arab workers, as we reported on in previous episodes. In Detroit yesterday, during the March 2nd International Day of Solidarity protest there, National Lawyers Guild, Detroit and Michigan, legal observers were detained and protesters were cited. And the National Lawyers Guild, Detroit, Michigan, put out a immediate press release immediately after the demonstration that stated, in part, on the afternoon of March 2nd, 2 dedicated volunteers and a staff member from the National Lawyers Guild, Detroit and Michigan chapter were unjustly detained and issued citations by officers of the Detroit Police Department while diligently performing their duties as legal observers. Concurrently, several protesters also experienced unwarranted detention and citation. These citations were given following a demonstration that was part of a global day of action demanding an end to genocide in Palestine. Lisa Carlson, a legal observer coordinator for the chapter in Detroit, who was one of the people detained, said, quote, LOs were clearly targeted for citations at this action, which feels very much intended to have a chilling effect on our program and the movement for Palestine at large. Throughout the march, there was heavy police surveillance, yet no dispersal orders were issued. Police picked people up and off and gave blocking traffic citations when people were out of the street and trying to safely leave. The NLG Detroit and Michigan chapter vehemently condemns the egregious targeting of peaceful demonstrators and the interference with and intimidation of our legal observers. We strongly denounce the use of the law as a tool against peaceful protesters and those tasked with safeguarding their rights. We stand in solidarity with all of those cited and demand that all charges against both our volunteers and staff and protesters attending the march be dropped. Legal observers are identified by their distinctive neon green hats prominently displaying National Lawyers Guild and Legal Observer are well known to the Detroit Police Department. Their primary role is to monitor police conduct during protests and offer a connection to legal assistance for any arrested protesters. These neutral observers, unaffiliated with the event organizers, attend hundreds of actions across Michigan each year without incident. The right to peacefully protest the government, as well as to observe and document law enforcement activities, is well established and fundamental for all individuals in this country. The actions of the Detroit Police Department in this instance serve not only to provoke peaceful protesters and discourage the exercise of free speech, but to intimidate our staff and volunteers who are protecting protester rights. We adamantly demand the immediate dismissal of these baseless charges against all involved. For media inquiries, you can please contact Sarah Habbo, president of the NLG in Detroit and the Michigan chapter, at habbo.sara@gmail.com. And you can also find more information at michigannlg.org. That's michigannlg.org. And the statement is there. And for more information, you can find that there as well. And going west to Oakland, middle school students held a walkout last week. Students walked out of Westlake Middle School on February 28th to protest the cancellation of a meeting that Bay Area labor groups had planned to host at the campus over the weekend in support of Palestine. Demonstration planned by Westlake's Black Student Union is the latest action by students and staff who are dissatisfied with the district's handling of events and discussions related to the war in Gaza. Bay Area Labor for Palestine, a coalition of local unions, had reserved Westlake for what was billed as a, quote, mass organizing and teach-in, end quote, meeting on Sunday. OUSD allows the public to reserve and rent space in its facilities through an online platform. On Saturday, organizers said they received notice from the district that their event could not use the campus because of staffing shortages. Westlake students were joined by representatives from Bay Area Labor for Palestine, a coalition that includes the Oakland and San Francisco Teachers Unions, Arab Resource and Organizing Center, the ILWU, Local 10, Jewish Voice for Peace Bay Area, and others who viewed the district's actions as censorship. Timothy Killings, the advisor of the Black Student Union at Westlake, said his students came up with the idea for the walkout after he told them about the canceled meeting. Quote, someone in the district closed a school meeting that was going to be held here, and we're going to be walking out because we don't think that's okay, said Davian Johnson, a seventh grader at Westlake. We also don't think that it's okay for Israel to just go into other people's land without permission and take their stuff and kill innocent civilians, said Johnson. So these reports are from various different sources and but can be found collectively at laborforpalestine.net. That's laborforpalestine.net. The last item for Palestine today on We Rise Fighting here will be Palestine and May Day. Many union members and community activists are already discussing direct actions for May Day in solidarity with Palestine. The Bay Area Labor for Palestine has put out a statement entitled Withhold Your Labor on May Day, and discussions are happening in various cities about also having other direct actions, Palestinian solidarity contingents, and other actions for May Day 2024. And there will be ongoing updates and developments and announcements at laborforpalestine.net about these activities. All right, Rick, we're going to go to West Virginia to talk about the Kroger union workers.
That's right. We're going to go to West Virginia, and we're going to go to a few places today, actually. But yes, we are starting in West Virginia. And the headline of this article reads, Kroger union workers vote to reject contract and authorize strike. And this is from WCHSTV.com news. And I left out a lot of a good chunk of the article, only because it was mostly quotes of Kroger executives and Kroger press releases, stuff like that. But I did want to share this much. Union workers at dozens of Kroger stores in the region voted Friday to authorize a strike, officials said. About 3,000 Kroger employees who are members of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 400 union voted in favor of authorizing a strike at 38 stores in West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio, according to a news release from the union. Now, I just wanted to stop and highlight that real quick. West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. West Virginia and Kentucky are right-to-work states. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that they're doing this in right-to-work states because it's bolder, it's more inspiring, and we will continue to keep you posted on what's happening. So just wanted to highlight that real quick. The vote means the Union Bargaining Committee can call a strike at any moment, but workers are not on strike at this time. And this is something that, we've talked about a few times on this show, exactly what authorizing a strike, what that strike authorization vote means. It doesn't, when workers vote on that, they're authorizing, they're giving the authority to the Union Bargaining Committee or the union leadership to call a strike. So they're not calling a strike in that very moment, usually. And here the article ends with this. Members voted 1,375 to 214, in other words, 87%, to reject the company's contract proposal, and 1,347 to 229, in other words, 85%, to authorize a strike. The potential work stoppage could happen at any moment and impact approximately 3,000 workers. Of course, also the surrounding communities. One other thing that I wanted to just pick apart from this article was the Union Bargaining Committee. If you're a member of the of a union and there's a bargaining committee, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if there's a bargaining committee, any worker, any union member can be a member of the bargaining committee. Is that correct? Do you know otherwise? Because that's been my understanding, and that actually goes all the way back in the day cafe to UMass, to our collective bargaining class, where I remember our professor was talking about how it's desirable for the union to have a lot of people on the bargaining committee because the bosses always try to match the number of people that the union has. And, for the union, it's just the workers, who are there to represent themselves. But for the bosses, it's lawyers. So they have to stack their tables with lawyers in order to appear to have the same negotiating power, if you will, at the negotiating table. I don't know if you remember that. Do you recall that at all, Brian?
Yes, Rick. I think there's a variety of different approaches to this. So some unions have, depending upon their bylaws, that a bargaining team can be elected for the negotiations, or that, for example, a lot of education unions, Minneapolis, St. Paul, for example, even community members can join, or union members that are not on the bargaining team can join and witness bargaining. So that's gotten a lot better over the last, recent period. But typically, and then there's also some discussion in the labor movement about is it important to have a variety of different members at the bargaining table and packing the bargaining room, whether it's online or in person, and matching that with, for example, contract action teams and organizing in the work site at the very same time and having a balance between the two. So there's the bylaws of a given local union that would need to be followed in terms of election of a bargaining team and how that process unfolds. But most unions now are getting to the point where any member of the bargaining unit can attend bargaining and participate in bargaining, which is strongly advised as you raised.
Okay, thanks for clarifying on that, Brian. All right, up next, got another article. Twin Cities janitors to begin 3-day strike Monday outside Ameriprise headquarters. This news from St. Paul, Minnesota. Thousands of essential workers in the Twin Cities will take to the picket line Monday morning after months of unsuccessful bargaining. Over 4,000 janitors with the Service Employees International Union Local 26 will begin a 3-day strike at 6 a.m. tomorrow outside the Ameriprise headquarters in downtown Minneapolis. The union says the workers intend to strike at over 100 buildings across the metro this week. SEIU's janitorial sector bargaining unit voted in early February to approve an unfair labor practices strike on behalf of its 8,000 members. Since then, multiple groups have reached settlements, including retail janitors and security officers. However, commercial janitors have yet to reach a deal. A final quote-unquote marathon bargaining session was held last Friday and went late into the evening, but no deal was reached. The majority immigrant and people of color commercial janitors work for subcontracts like ABM, Marsden, and Harvard to clean buildings housing some of the richest corporations in the world, yet are struggling to win fair wages, retirement security, and other benefits despite having helped keep our communities clean and safe throughout COVID, the union said. You know, I gotta highlight that. We were talking about that right before we jumped on. I really have to highlight the work of the janitors. Just because something really hit me. So I had the opportunity to organize with the Service Employees International Union once in Connecticut, and we were organizing janitors. We were organizing janitors at Fairfield University, this Jesuit school there. I remember one of the flyers that we had that my fellow organizer came up with said, "Fairies don't clean your buildings," speaking to the students, or it asked the question like, who do you think cleans the building? Fairies show up at night or something to that effect. And really nothing brings it home like that. We need to recognize the labor that everyone does. And in this case, they're talking about 100 buildings and how these are the people who clean the buildings for that house some of the richest corporations in the world. Then why can't they be paid a living wage? Why can't they be paid something that gives them comfort and security and health and education and all that? Because their work is important. We've talked about it on the show before. As far as I'm concerned, the labor of the janitor is of equal value to the labor of the doctor, right? As far as keeping bathrooms clean, keeping things sanitary so as to prevent the spread of diseases or illnesses or anything like that. Their work of cleaning up the bathrooms, keeping things tidy, disinfecting, all of that is just as important. Did the janitor have the opportunity to attend medical school and devote themselves to, the rigor of that education? Chances are no, although some have. And I did meet them at Fairfield University. Which is another side story. It was something else to really meet Latin American janitors who were doctors and just weren't able to get jobs here in the U.S. So there they were, doing whatever they had to do, cleaning buildings, cleaning bathrooms, doing those types of jobs. And, I guess to tease the idea out just a little bit and all the way, like it really hit me because I thought to myself, good Lord, if I was sick, I'd become friends with this janitor. I know he would look out for me. He's a doctor as well. Why can't he just practice medicine? That's jacked. Like I could benefit from him. So anyway, this article took me back a little bit to that experience, and I wanted to share those couple of ideas. The article continues. As of Sunday, every member of the St. Paul City Council and most of the Minneapolis City Council expressed their support for the union. Other unions have offered quote-unquote strike sanctions in support as well, meaning they will not cross the picket line so long as their contract allows. The union says a quote-unquote big community rally will be held outside the Ameriprise headquarters at 5 p.m. Monday to celebrate the first day of the strike. The next scheduled bargaining session is for Friday, this coming Friday. Moving on to international news, we're going to move on to Nigeria right now. And the article from an Associated Press article reads the title reads as follows: Nigeria's union workers are on strike nationwide over soaring inflation and unmet promises. This is news coming from Abuja, Nigeria. Nigeria's government employees and other union workers began a new nationwide strike Tuesday that threatened to shut down key services while people are angry about soaring inflations and growing economic pain. Since assuming office in Africa's most populous country last year, President Bola Tinubu has enacted policies that include doing away with fuel subsidies and unifying the country's multiple exchange rates, leading to a devaluation of the naira against the dollar. Gasoline prices have more than doubled, and inflation has shot up as a result, reaching close to 30% last month, the highest in nearly 3 decades, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. This is just the latest strike action. In October, government labor unions reached a deal with the government to end strikes in return for monthly stipends and subsidies to cushion the blow of the new policies. Still, the unrest continues. Unions say the government has failed to deliver on promises that include a monthly wage increase of approximately $20 for all workers for 6 months and payments of approximately $15 for 3 months to millions of vulnerable households. So that's the news from Nigeria. As always, we like to bring you news from the international sphere, just to let you know what other unions are doing, what kind of demands they make, what kind of actions they take, because we can always learn something from other unions abroad. And in that same spirit, we're going to move on to Argentina, and this is actually a labor notes article. The headline of the article reads as follows: Argentinian working people fight Milei's far-right government with a general strike. Now check this out. More than 1.5 million people took part in a general strike in Argentina on January 24th against the new president and his aggressive anti-union reforms. Self-described liberal libertarian Javier Milei, who won the November 22nd presidential election, is an economist who became popular as a panelist on a TV show. He advocated for ending the quote-unquote privileges of the casta, defined as corrupt politicians and social and union leaders taking advantage of quote-unquote good people. With a new party, Freedom Advances, La Libertad Avanza, Milei won the votes of a range of people, from working-class people disappointed and angry with the incumbent Peronist government to the middle and ruling classes opposed to state intervention in the economy and income distribution. His government's new austerity program has already dealt a heavy blow to the pockets of working people. Days after he took office, Milei froze public workers' wages, social assistance programs, and pensions, imposed a 118% devaluation of the Argentine peso, and increased tariffs for energy, public transport, and public services. Real wages have plummeted nearly 15%. The government has also cut off food supplies to a lot of community organizations running comedores comunitarios, in other words, places where the unemployed and poor families can get some meals. The popular response to this all-out assault was not long in coming, starting on December 20th with a demonstration called by leftist parties, human rights organizations, and social justice movements to commemorate the anniversary of the Argentinazo, the popular uprising that threw out the conservative government of Fernando de la Rúa in 2001. It was not canceled despite threats of repression by the Minister of Security. This successful mobilization empowered people, so after Milei made the announcement of his decree on a nationwide broadcast, spontaneous cacerorazos, which are protest demonstrations featuring the banging of pots and pans, they were heard all over the city, in Buenos Aires and in some of the suburbs. After failing to negotiate a less drastic labor bill, the country's main union federation, the CGT, called the mobilization to the highest court on December 27th, where they filed an appeal for protection against the decree. Both factions of the other major union federation joined the call. So did many groups, such as football clubs against privatization, cultural organizations, popular economy and piquetero organizations, popular assemblies. The filing of appeals for legal protections by different organizations affected by decree has multiplied with mixed results, but the application of those provisions referred to as the quote-unquote labor reform has been suspended. All this paved the way for a general strike called by the CGT. Soon, many organizations joined in a broad coalition to organize the strike, a response to the government's offensive over people's living conditions and social, labor, feminist, and environmental groups. It was different from other recent general strikes in Argentina. First, it was called only 45 days after a new government took office. Despite the adverse conditions suffered by the working class during and after the pandemic, the CGT has not called a general strike since 2019. The Federation's leadership, which tends to prefer dialogue with the government and employers, is thus showing a change of strategy, recognizing a strong offensive by capital and in the face of government that is unwilling to negotiate. Second, it's new that the CGT worked in coordination with a broad array of organizations and groups. This is the first time that the main representatives of Madres de Plaza de Mayo, an organization created during the last dictatorship by the mothers of people disappeared by the ruling military junta, were on the main stage of a general strike together with the general secretaries of the CGT. They raised the popular demands of memory, truth, and justice in the face of a government whose main figures have repeatedly supported the dictatorship. Las Madres launched a call for unity and courage to defend democracy and defy authoritarianism. Our children were workers, they reminded us. Feminist groups, human rights organizations, cultural workers, tenants unions, and political parties, from the left grouped in the Left Workers Front, FITU, to factions of traditional Peronist and radical parties, joined the labor federations and the popular economy and piquetero movement. So a lot of activity in Argentina. Argentina has definitely seen some labor turbulence and strikes and general strikes over the last 20 years. It's definitely another Latin American nation to watch.
Rick, I'd like to just raise a couple items with you. Back to the SEIU in Minneapolis and this strike here. Just what you think about this, that tomorrow morning the strike starts in Minneapolis at 6 a.m. And it's clear that they're not just relying on the workers on the picket lines, although that's critical, shutting down the production and distribution of services, but also the same day having a community rally, also meeting with the city council, also having agreements and conversations with labor unions in the city of Minneapolis, not to cross the picket lines in Metro Minneapolis, and all of this before work being done before going out on strike. And not just having workers out there by themselves on strike, but really making it a labor community struggle against the bosses. And simultaneously in Argentina, we're seeing here, based on your report, that this was a class-wide upsurge. It wasn't just unions taking on the neoliberal offensive and the capitalist offensive in this period, and the capitalists generally in line with the military potentially, but the government. And all of this has been done. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me was the mothers being on the stage with the leaders. That is a significant advancement. What's your thoughts on these developments?
You know, it goes back to another episode that we had here where we talked about how to build a united front. I think this is how you do it. Yeah, feminist groups, with environmental groups, with labor groups, with the mothers of the disappeared. Yeah, everyone build solidarity like that and build a united front. And also, I think that, Brian, we have no choice at this point. I think that the U.S. labor movement has to relearn how to do things. You know, we've been schooled in business unionism for so many generations now, and business unionism detaches itself from the community. You know, they just focus on bread and butter issues, negotiating contracts, and not much more, right? Just administrative measures. So, yeah, we have to relearn how to be one with the community. Because as we've talked about on the show before, you know, so much stuff in the US is illegal as far as labor law that we're going to have to start breaking the law. Not because we're defiant, not because we're seeking that thrill, but because so much stuff is illegal. And in order to, I think, effectively carry that out, we need to have the community support. The community can't see the union as an other or as a third party or as, this kind of insurance company or it's insurance agency kind of deal that just negotiates contracts for its workers. We need to step away from that. And you're right. I think that these two articles really brought home what that would look like and what that could look like here in the US. Thank you for pointing that out, Brian. Up next, keeping you updated on Teamster news. Went to the Teamsters website just last minute as we were getting things together today and caught up with one of their press releases that reads, tentative agreement reached day before 5,000 brewery Teamsters set to strike. So this is big news. Today, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters reached a 5-year tentative agreement significantly raising pay, improving healthcare and retirement benefits, and providing critical job security for all 5,000 Teamsters at Anheuser Busch breweries nationwide. The tentative agreement was unanimously recommended by the Teamsters National Negotiating Committee after reconvening at the bargaining table with Anheuser Busch representatives late in the day on Wednesday. Teamsters make the beers, Teamsters make Anheuser Busch successful, and our members deserve the best contract. This is what we fought for and won today, said Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien. Anheuser Busch knew our members were serious and prepared to do whatever it would take to get a fair contract. After a long day and a longer campaign, we've reached an agreement that sets a new high standard for the brewing industry. Teamsters continue to hold the line at Molson Coors in Texas for a fair contract, but Molson Coors should pay close attention to the bar we've set today for brewery workers across the country. Highlights of the tentative Teamster agreement include significant job security for all 5,000 Teamsters at Anheuser Busch, including brewers, packagers, and warehouse workers. Wage increases of $8 an hour, including an immediate $4 an hour wage increase in the first year. Average wage increases totaled 23% over the length of the agreement. $2,500 ratification bonus for each member, and an end to two-tier healthcare, providing all workers with the same high-quality Teamster healthcare coverage. Also, increased pension contributions and benefits nationwide, increased maximum vacation accrual to 8 paid weeks, and the restoration of retirement benefits for active and retired members. Now, everything I just read, the significant job security, the wage increases of $8 an hour, $4 an hour in the first year, $2,500 ratification vote, all of this stuff, we have to consider this stuff when we consider what a struggle looks like, right? We've said this before on the show. How long would this stuff take to negotiate with politicians? How long would this stuff take to legislate? Here they are. Here's the Teamsters just threatening a strike after threatening a strike at UPS, after the U.S. saw the United Auto Workers carry out a successful strike, and after the U.S. saw Kaiser Permanente workers and SAG-AFTRA carry out successful strikes. Here are the Teamsters now just threatening strikes, and they're making these kinds of gains. How long would this take to legislate? Like, how many conversations with Bernie Sanders, with AOC, with the Squad, with the liberal factions of the Democratic Party? How long would that take, and compared to direct action? We're highlighting that over and over on this show, because we're going to start talking more and more about the 2024 elections. So again, just wanted to highlight that one more time. Congratulations to the Teamsters. I hope this is the contract that they both want and ratify, but we will keep you updated either way. In closing for today's show is some news from Starbucks workers, which Brian's going to jump on that. So what's going on with that, Brian?
All right, Rick, and our listeners, our first contract is finally in sight for unionized Starbucks workers. And in these times, wrote an article about this. And of course, there's more information at Starbucks Workers United. Kicks off with Alicia Flores of Portland, Oregon, with a quote, "The fight is worth fighting for. This victory alone proves that no workplace is out of reach for organizing." And Sister Alicia was fired for organizing there in Portland. And she is speaking in a personal capacity, being quoted by In These Times. The two sides hope the agreement will form the basis for contract talks at nearly 400 union shops the resolution of ongoing litigation and an agreement over rules governing future organizing at Starbucks locations. While the publicly announced details of the agreement include few specifics and even fewer guarantees, the Barista Network has won at least the potential for negotiations over a first master contract. Dave Camper says, quote, "This agreement is a very, very big deal." He's a senior strategist at the progressive think tank Economic Policy Institute. Camper goes on to say, Starbucks Workers United has shown that determined workers willing to use all the tools of worker power at their disposal can bring companies to the bargaining table. Starbucks also announced that as a measure of good faith, it will provide credit card tipping and other benefits to union stores that it has provided to non-union stores since May 2022. And we salute our fellow workers at Starbucks for weeks, months, and years. Many courageous and brave Starbucks workers from one end of the United States to the other have been organizing and organizing some more with a variety of creative actions. And we are very proud to have interviewed Starbucks workers here, report on the campaigns many times, and we will continue to do that at We Rise Fighting. And we wish our fellow workers well there at Starbucks to keep giving the bosses hell because they deserve it, and to win the fair contract that they so immediately deserve. So check out the Starbucks Workers United on social media for more information and how to support solidarity with these Starbucks workers and all the workers we talked about today on the show. Back to you, Rick.
Indeed, solidarity with the Starbucks workers and all other workers mentioned on this show. In particular, though, the Starbucks workers, thank you so much. We've been covering Starbucks for a long time here on this show. We are definitely inspired by the struggle that's taking place there, the young blood that's coming into the labor movement, the new ideas that's coming into the labor movement. It's like a breath of fresh air. So hats off to Starbucks workers, hats off to the Teamsters, to the international labor movement. If you like what you hear on this show, please go ahead and subscribe, share, like, whatever it is you do. We appreciate it. We appreciate you listening. Thank you once again. Love and solidarity to all. We'll talk again next week, everyone. Have a good night. Bye-bye.